Fine Lives of Leo Roberts, a series of interconnected short stories written and narrated by Robert Fairhead from the Tall and True writer's website. 1. Rock Fishing. Uncle Bernie parked his car alongside the dunes behind the rock fishing beach. Nursing a bucket in the back seat, Leo had vomited several times during the drive, and the last bumpy section on the off-road track leading to the beach hadn't helped. "Chuck up in the bucket," Uncle Bernie had warned him. "I don't want any stains on the upholstery. Besides," he'd added with a laugh, trying to sound less gruff, "it'll be burly for the fish." The mental image of fish feeding on his vomit only triggered more retching from Leo in the back seat. "Come on, son," Uncle Bernie said, opening the back door and taking the bucket. "You'll feel better with fresh air in your lungs." Leo climbed out of the car. He often got car sick, but Leo liked rock fishing, and, as Uncle Bernie promised, he felt less queasy breathing the sea air, carried by the wind with the sound of waves breaking and seagulls squawking behind the dunes. Uncle Bernie unloaded their fishing rods from the roof rack. He grabbed the tackle box from the boot, and a foam esky with ice for their drinks and bait, and the fish they planned to catch. Leo carried the shorter fishing rod and tackle box, while Uncle Bernie juggled the longer rod, esky, and bucket through the dunes. Leo whistled a cheery tune, and Uncle Bernie smiled. He wasn't the boy's real uncle, but a friend of his great-aunt, Elsie. 8-year-old Leo lived with his single mother, Rita, in Elsie's large, run-down house. Bernie had left his home handyman flyer in Elsie's letterbox, and a friendship blossomed between them as he worked on her long list of repairs. But she cautioned Bernie. "My priorities are Rita and dear Leo." Bernie liked Leo, but he thought Rita took advantage of her aunt. However, he said nothing about it, because Bernie enjoyed his later life companionship with Elsie, and sometimes, after a home-cooked meal with wine and laughter, she invited Bernie to stay overnight in the spare room. On his way to the toilet one night, Leo had caught Uncle Bernie sneaking from Auntie Elsie's bedroom. Uncle Bernie winked and put a finger to his lips. "Shh. Can you keep a secret, son?" he asked, and Leo nodded. Leo was good at keeping secrets. He'd seen strangers leave his mother's bedroom in the middle of the night, tiptoeing down the hallway to the front door. Some visited his mother during the day. A few tousled Leo's hair, but none showed much interest in him, or took him rock fishing, like Uncle Bernie. The path through the dunes opened onto the beach, where wet sand stretched to a crescent-shaped rock shelf. Uncle Bernie explained that the tide was low, but had turned and was rising. "The rocks will be underwater in a few hours," he added. "Let's get fishing, son." A Chinese family was already fishing on the sheltered southern end of the rock shelf, with seagulls fighting over scraps of gutted fish. So Uncle Bernie and Leo set up on the exposed northern end. They zipped their spray jackets to keep out the wind gusting from the sea and whipping up waves over the edge of the rock shelf. "Now, remember what I've told you about rock fishing, son," Uncle Bernie said. "The rocks are slippery. If you fall into the sea, it'll be deep, rough, and cold. So what do you do?" Don't fall in?" Leo wasn't trying to be funny, but Uncle Bernie laughed and patted him on the back. "Exactly, son. But also, watch where you're walking and keep away from the edge." Bernie waited for Leo to bait his hook and cast his line before moving along the rock shelf to prevent their lines from tangling. He was fond of the boy. Leo reminded him of his son at the same age, and the long-gone days when they went rock fishing together. Bernie sighed. He wouldn't admit it to anyone, but playing Leo's surrogate great-uncle was part of the attraction of his friendship with Elsie. Bernie enjoyed teaching Leo how to do things, like rock fishing, and if he and Elsie stayed friends, Bernie hoped to guide the boy through the troubled teenage years, as he wished he'd done for his son. Bernie sighed again and cast his line. Leo knew Uncle Bernie wasn't his real uncle, but apart from Auntie Elsie and his mother, his real relatives lived across the sea in England. Kids at school had brothers and sisters, grandparents, aunts, uncles and cousins, and even mothers and fathers who lived together, but not Leo. Leo's father never visited or called on the phone, but he sent him birthday and Christmas cards, sometimes with odd-looking banknotes tucked inside. One year, his father included a photo of himself with the card. He was wearing dirty overalls, standing beside a car with its bonnet up, but he wasn't smiling for the camera. Leo thought his father looked angry in the photo, like his mother when strangers stopped calling her, and she shouted at him as if it was his fault. "Stay away from your mother when she's in one of her moods, dear," Auntie Elsie told Leo. But lately, his mother always seemed to be in a bad mood. Uncle Bernie reeled in his first fish. Leo looked across and watched him gut it, shooing away the seagulls and dropping the headless body onto the ice in the esky. One thing Leo liked about rock fishing was feeling fish nibble on the baited hook through his forefinger resting on the line. Uncle Bernie taught him to let the nibbles grow stronger before jerking the rod back over his shoulder to hook a fish. But Leo didn't like the catching and killing part of fishing. He left that to Uncle Bernie and let the fish eat his bait. Bernie caught a second fish and waved to Leo. He'd seen him reel in empty lines and chuckled. The boy wasn't much of a fisherman, but unlike Bernie's son, Leo didn't throw down his rod and lose interest in rock fishing. He just replaced the bait on his hook and cast the line again. Leo was a good boy, a little quiet, but a thinker. In his school reports, teachers described Leo as an above-average student who loved reading books and writing stories. They also said he was a daydreamer. When Auntie Elsie suggested, "You might be a writer when you grow up, dear," his mother retorted, "Not if he doesn't pay more attention in class." Leo tried, but he couldn't stop gazing out the classroom window and wondering about the world beyond the school grounds. That was something else he enjoyed about rock fishing. Standing on the rock shelf, staring out to sea, and imagining life below the surface. It fired his imagination, like books and writing stories. Leo pictured himself as a fish, swimming across the sea to visit his English relatives. Hopefully not through the Burley. Time passed both slowly and swiftly while rock fishing. Bernie landed and gutted a third fish. "One more and we'll pack up," he called to Leo over the stiffening wind and waves. The boy nodded and smiled. Leo looked happy, even though he hadn't caught a fish, and Bernie smiled back at him. A fourth fish, and that'll be enough for everyone tonight, Bernie thought, including Rita, if she was home for dinner. And with a nice bottle of wine, Elsie might invite him to stay over. Bernie cast his line and let his mind ponder the pleasant possibilities of the night. Leo was still imagining himself as a fish, meeting his father for the first time in the English Channel, when a wave broke on the rock shelf and splashed him out of the daydream. As the wave retreated, Leo spotted a silver fish flapping in the shallow pool. He glanced across the rock shelf. Uncle Bernie was watching the end of his line, lowering and lifting the tip of his rod. If Leo was quick, he could rescue the fish without Uncle Bernie noticing he'd gone near the edge of the rock shelf. Bernie waited for the nibbles to grow stronger. Then he jerked back on the rod, hooked the fish, and started reeling in his line. It was a big one, and Bernie's rod bent as the fish fought for its life. He let out the line so it wouldn't snap, braced himself, and reeled in again. There was shouting from behind. "Hey! Oh!" Bernie looked over his shoulder. The Chinese family was on the beach, yelling and pointing. Bernie turned back to Leo. With a sickening surge of fear, he saw the boy's fishing rod on the rock shelf, but Leo was missing. "Leo!" Bernie bellowed. He dropped his rod and ran, slipping and sliding on the wet rocks to the edge of the rock shelf. Leo was a few metres away, thrashing about in the white-capped sea, trying to swim and keep his head above the waves. Bernie skidded back to the foam esky and upended it. Seagulls swooped onto the bait and fish as he slid to the edge of the rock shelf again and jumped into the sea, clutching the esky as a lifebuoy. Leo slipped from the rock shelf after rescuing the fish. He tried swimming back to the edge, but waves kept breaking on him, and the retreating swell pulled him further away. As Uncle Bernie warned, the sea was deep, rough and cold, and his wet clothes were heavy. Leo saw Uncle Bernie jump from the rock shelf, but then another wave crashed over him, and his vision filled with swirling white surf. Bernie saw Leo disappear beneath the wave. Years ago, he'd sat helpless at the hospital with his ex-wife, unable to save their teenage son. Now he felt like he was swimming in slow motion, trying to save Leo. The esky floated, but full of water, it dragged like a sea anchor. Bernie let it float away, took a deep breath, and dived under the waves. After his initial panic, Leo was calm below the roiling surface. He heard bubbles as his breath escaped and opened his eyes. A school of silver fish flashed past him. Leo thought it might be the fish from the rock pool and its family come to save him, or perhaps it was his family from England swimming over to visit him. Was his father with them? Would he be happy to see Leo? Or angry, like in the photo? Leo's brain was full of thoughts. He wished he could talk about them with Auntie Elsie, or even his mother, but she'd probably be angry and shout at him for falling into the sea, and wouldn't let Uncle Bernie take him rock fishing again. Leo was tired of thinking. He felt sleepy, so he closed his eyes, and in the moments before he blacked out, Leo imagined a giant squid, like the one he'd read about in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, wrapping its tentacles around his body. Hi, I'm Robert Fairhead from Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website. As I explain in the Season 5 trailer, Seasons 1 to 4 of Tall and True Short Reads feature short stories, blog posts and other writings I've shared on Tall and True. Most are standalone episodes, but I also narrated several multi-part episodes for longer stories and posts. I wanted to do something different for Season 5, so I'm writing and narrating a series of interconnected short stories exploring sliding door moments, titled The 9 Lives of Leo Roberts. I released the first episode, Prologue, The Clinic, in February 2025. One, Rock Fishing, is the long overdue second episode. There were several reasons for the delayed release of this episode. One was my increasing involvement in the election campaign for my local Member of Parliament. After her successful re-election, I had a backlog of other writing and website projects to complete, and then I had a deserved holiday. However, the main reason was that I hadn't appreciated how difficult it is to write interconnected short stories. The Gotham Writers Workshop defines them as stories that are complete in that each story can stand alone, but when put together, they interrelate and create a larger whole. I had to learn how to make rock fishing a standalone story, but also one that would interrelate with the clinic and later short stories in the series to create a larger whole. I leave it to you, the podcast listener, to judge whether I've been successful. As with the clinic episode, I have drawn on elements of autofiction and rock fishing. I was born in England, but raised in Australia from the age of 2. Like Leo, I had English relatives who I didn't see until I travelled to England in my mid-20s. Unlike Leo, and fortunately for me, I wasn't an only child and had Australian grandparents, aunts, uncles and cousins who I saw regularly. My parents separated when I was 5, and my younger brother and I lived with my father at my paternal grandparents' house. Like Leo, I was an oddity at school in the late 1960s and early 70s for not having a mother and father who lived together. Also like Leo, I fell in the water twice while fishing with my father when I was a boy. Once from a jetty into a river, and another time I slipped from a rocky harbour groin into the sea. Thankfully, both times my father dragged me from the water, and I only ended up with wet clothes. And finally, like Leo, I liked books and writing stories when I was a boy. And I was a daydreamer who loved staring out to sea and wondering about life beyond the horizon. I'll be writing the next episode of Leo's 9 Lives shortly. In the meantime, please browse the podcast feed or the website tallandtrueshortreads.com to enjoy over 100 episodes from the past 4 seasons. You'll find a selection of my short stories, blog posts and other writings at tallandtrue.com. You can also buy my short story and microfiction collections, including my latest, One Day in the Life of Alex's AI, and other speculative fiction, from the Amazon Kindle, Apple Books and Kobo online bookstores. There are links in the show notes. Please follow or subscribe to Tall and True Short Reads and rate and review it on your favourite podcasting app. Doing so helps share my storytelling with other listeners. You can support the podcast and my Season 5 stories by making a small one-off or regular donation through the Acast supporter page. Once again, there is a link in the show notes. Finally, please share this episode with family and friends and spread the word about Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website.